Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
Death God Storm.
Okay, the edge lord himself. And what are we here to talk about today? Death God Storm.
Today we are here to talk about the 2021 A24 released movie, The Green Knight, directed by David Lowery and starring Dev Patel and a bunch of character actors in small bits, although it's hard to say it stars anyone except Dev Patel since no one else is in it for more than 20 minutes at a time. But it's a movie that came out last year. It is a retelling of and makes some significant changes to the 14th century poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It's basically just about this dude named Sir Gawain, who is the nephew of King Arthur, that goes on a journey to eventually get beheaded by the Green Knight, and hijinks ensue.
Indeed. So it was funny because we started watching this, Haley and I, last night, and it's like that. First of all, major complaint off the bat with this movie. Okay. This is the quietest movie ever made, including every single silent film. Literally,
It's really fucking quiet. Yeah.
everyone is constantly whispering or talking under their breath, and I hate it for that. But regardless, so we were watching it last night, and like it's just that opening. I guess you'd call it like an abstract of Sir Gawain sitting there on the throne and like his headlights on fire and stuff. And Haley just goes, "Oh, okay, I know what this is about now." And I was like, "What? What is it?" She goes, "Oh, you'll figure it out. Hold on." And I'm sitting there and I watched the whole fucking movie. I'm like, "So what the fuck was this? You've never heard of this story before?" I go, "No. I've never heard of this fucking Green Knight beheading bullshit before," which is hilarious because I'm usually the one like into myth, but I've never really gotten super into the Arthurian stuff. So this was my first experience with the story of the Green Knight, and I had to go look up a YouTube video that explained the story.
Oh, interesting.
Just like the original myth in and of itself. So it was kind of unique for me in that regard.
I'm surprised because I know Ruben's a big King Arthur guy.
And he
So I
never
could've
picked
figured
any
that-
King Arthur stuff the entire time he was on the show. He knew we'd like there's an episode of Geeky Gentlemen where it's like, let me guess, and you guys hated it. Where you could just tell like he was getting kind of sick that we kept shitting on the things he liked apparently. And he never fucking picked any King Arthur stuff. He picked one King Arthur thing the entire time he was on the fucking... Maybe more than just one, but very few King Arthur things were ever brought up with Ruben, so no.
Interesting. Okay. And I don't think Matt or Alfie are particularly big into King Arthur either. And I know jack shit about King Arthur. So we're in good company.
Okay, good. So then I feel like we can with confidence say this is the most accurate version of this story ever put to film.
Oh, no, 100%. Every line of it is true. It's all lifted from the poem. We all know where this goes.
Yeah. So no, it's just interesting. I will say, I think of what we've watched so far, Conan, Northman, this is the one that is like doing the thing that I wanted from those other movies the most, where it's just, it's just fucking like the knight is a tree man and no one thinks that's weird. And fucking there's giants and ghosts and shit just around. Like it's just this is just the world in which we exist. I really appreciated that shit is just there and it's on screen and it's not trying to like justify itself in any way.
Well, there's that great moment where like he just sees giants roaming the ground. He's like, "Hey, can I have a ride on your shoulder?" Like it's not a weird thing to ask at all.
Yeah, no, I loved it. It was fantastic.
Let me ask you this, given that you're not a King Arthur guy and I'm not a King Arthur guy, and there's a certain degree of like homework that must be done watching something like this.
I did not know it was King Arthur that was the king until I watched a video explaining the story of the Green Knight today. The whole time I did not know that was King Arthur.
They were in the courtroom, and he was like, "You are my sister's son," and he gives him the sword, and there's like a weird awestruck moment to it. I wasn't sure if you caught that was supposed to be King Arthur.
Nope, no idea. Did not understand that until... Like, they never even call him Arthur, right? It's always just the king.
No, he's not even credited as Arthur.
That's silly. I'm mad.
Well, and there's a lot of stuff like that. Like the fact that he is Arthur's nephew, which means he is Morgan Le Fay's son.
And Morgan Le Fay is a witch
never gets
here.
brought up.
And it's just like awkward because she's just part of the court instead of an enemy of it, you know?
Well, and there are, I'm sure, lots of complex King Arthur lore reasons for why that is, but it is kind of interesting how much this movie just kind of takes for granted that you know things, and if you don't know things, it just kind of works as its own symbolic story where it doesn't 100% matter. I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of lore dumping here that enhances what you're watching, but without it, you can kind of just use it to infer anything, and it still kind of works.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. I didn't really have a problem. I just assumed, yeah, his mom just fucking knows magic, and it's whatever. And then, like, the added fact of, oh no, that's Morgan Le Fay, and she was clearly hoping that fucking Arthur would take up the Green Knight's challenge and die. You know, like that, as like, the background context. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. Like, I like that. So that was appreciated.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when you throw more of that stuff in, especially when you add stuff like it was Arthur's own sword that ended up beheading him, and the kind of flash forward you get at the end of what becomes of Arthur's kingdom, and the fact that Arthur himself is kind of portrayed as old and sickly and out of touch and dying for a majority of the movie that he's in. Mm-hmm. Like I think it's really interesting how much care is taken in trying to like make it as vague as possible, but still reasonably well established.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I like a lot of those choices are all pretty solid. Because I guess I have a similar thing to the very first time I watched Game of Thrones in season 1, where it played itself so straight and so believable, and like everyone's talking about dragons and, you know, the ice walk, or the night walkers. I can't fucking remember the name of them right now.
The White Walkers.
White Walkers. There we go. Like everyone's talking about those things.
Call them frost giants, but they're not frost giants.
Yeah. Well, everyone's talking about all these things, but it's like, it's always like kind of laughed off, or like haha, yeah, right. To the point where some people in that world clearly don't believe in it, and if you missed like the first 2 minutes of episode 1 of season 1 of Game of Thrones, or you just forget about it like I did, you watch the whole thing and think, oh, so this is like some kind of weird like historical drama or something. Like, I don't really know the context of where this is supposed to be set, but this is interesting. And then fucking end season 1, yeah, dragons. I'm like, oh, it's all fantasy. Okay. This kind of works in a not the same way, but in a similar way. It's just like, it just feels like a kind of independent fantasy film, where if you don't realize that it's connected to King Arthur, it just functions as its own independent story, which is what I kind of thought it was when we first got into it, and then Haley said the thing that I'm like, wait, what? Huh? I have no idea what's going on, and I didn't the rest of the movie. So it was interesting.
So, how did you feel about it overall? Like, compared to the other two movies we've seen so far, and just in general, what did you think of this?
Again, I like this the most because it's just it's not afraid to just embrace what it is trying to do. It is not trying to be something more or less than itself, and so I appreciated that it's just, yeah, fucking, this is the world it is. There's giants and magic, and the fact that, like, a tree man walked into the king's court and said, "I am Groot," and then left. Like, it's all just so genuine and non, like, it's not self-referential, it's not making a joke out of anything that's on screen. It is just a high fantasy story that's trying to, like, comment on something deep. Like, so I watched just, like, fucking TED Talk video animation about the Green Knight story to, like, get context of what the quote-unquote original myth is today. And I'm sitting there watching it, and, like, it was weird to see how much this deviated from the details of the original, and how it kind of went out of its way to make a point about the ideas contained within, and attempt to, like, say, no, this story is actually about something else. It is a deeper story than just, like, a fun little fairy tale. There's something really going on here. So the whole conversation about this is a story about the inevitability of time and how it keeps marching on, and kings and men all fight against it, but they all fall to it in time, and eventually everything just goes back to nature. I found that aspect, that commentary, really fascinating. So it's interesting because I think there's an argument to be had. Is the story about that, or is that just this or is that just a message the director, writer, what have you, was into, and they used this story as the framing device for it to kind of skew the meaning toward that?
Well, I mean, I think it's the latter. I think it kind of has no choice but to be the latter, because this is a story that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. There's not only the original poem, but there's a lot of competing interpretations about it. It's not like King Arthur continuity is a thing that makes a whole lot of sense, or that tracks perfectly. And so I think what David Lowery ends up doing with this movie is he takes what the story means to him, or the things he's concerned about, and creates this amalgam, trying to figure out what he wants to say and how to best use these characters in this world to say it. And I really appreciate that. I feel like doing this with a property, or not even a property, but doing this with something that's a mythology that we're all so familiar with, really works. And I think it adds to the argument that a lot of these things that have been established characters or mythologies in our culture for decades or hundreds of years really need to enter the public domain more often, so you have the ability to kind of stretch their meaning instead of being bound by one continuity or one interpretation. And so this movie takes the story of the Green Knight, which is kind of a morality tale in a lot of ways about what the concept of chivalry means inside of Arthur's court, and sort of interrogates that and reveals the issues with it, kind of like the Northman does, but then also has this edge to it that's between nature versus man, and things going back into nature, and hubris, and the kinds of things that we feel like we need to do in order to be heroes in themselves. And the fact that Gawain goes on this journey, that he starts as kind of this arrogant guy. He thinks he can kind of circumvent the game by slicing off the Green Knight's head at the very beginning, and then having to spend that year dreading what's coming to him, and then going on this journey to see these rules that he's spent his life trying to abide by. Not only does he fail to live up to them, but why are these things that are worth living up to in the first place? That he sort of back and forth has these moments where there's that one scene where the woman's asking him to get his head from the lake, and he's like, what do I get in return? And she's just like, why would you ask me that? Like, it's the most nonsensical thing in the world for a fledgling knight to ask what he gets in return. And then the scene with the Alicia Vikander where like she's trying to seduce him and he gives in and she's just like, wow, you're no knight, and just walks away from him. There's all these moments where the things he clearly thinks he wants in his life he is not able to have, but are these things that he should be doing in the first place. And then he sort of accepts his fate at the end. He gets that glimpse into the future and he finds the courage to stay in that moment and let himself die. And we don't entirely know what happens afterwards, and I kind of dig that. I like that it's this more open interpretation of, is this a story about why Sir Gawain's sacrifice is something to be applauded, or is this a story about why this kind of journey is reckless and foolhardy?
Well, it's interesting because the movie goes out of its way to insert elements from the original story. Like it ticks all the boxes. You get the magical sash. You get the weird fetish couple in the woods and stuff, and it changes a lot of the like moment to moment things. I think the biggest thing that I don't know if it changes it or not, because it kind of shows you the fallout of what would become, is in the story as it was told, or as it at least popularly exists enough to be made into a TED Talk video. He wears the sash when he takes the knee, and the Green Knight tries to chop off his head, and the sash works, and all he receives is a small cut. And he's like surprised that he got a cut at all. He thinks the sash didn't work. But he reveals it to the Green Knight, and the Green Knight reveals that he was the husband, and yada yada yada. So, like, obviously all of those elements don't stay, but the thing we do get is this weird flash of, like, okay, what would happen if he had run away, or what would happen if he did survive the encounter with the, like, because of the sash. And you see that, like, life kind of goes to shit. So then being there and accepting the fate, accepting the chivalry, you've accepted the bargains, so now you must, pay your end of it, was just... And leaving that to, all right, then what did happen? Well, I thought that was quite interesting. To take a lot of the beats of the myth and then kind of subvert them and leave it in this weird, vague way. So to take it and say, all right, and here he throws away the sash. And then the Green Knight gets oddly affectionate.
Yeah, I really dig that, like, there's a lot of subtlety in how they track what Gawain's ending is, and whether or not you buy into, like, the more depressing alternate future or something a little bit more wholesome, where he, in the false sort of ending, he runs away and is a complete coward, goes back, becomes king, and his kingdom ends up in ruins. And then after that flash forward, he takes the sash off and accepts his fate. And so it's interesting to see if he decided to be courageous, if he decided to just simply accept his fate, then he's not the same person that would have run away as a coward and ruined his kingdom, is he? Like, he could have accepted his fate, gotten just the nick on his cheek, and then gone back and become actually a great king. And that was supposed to be the lesson for him. Or it's that he's accepted his fate and realizes that regardless of what he decides to do, this is simply what's going to happen. That things will inevitably just return to nature, and there's no amount of chivalrous code that allows you to rescue the world from that. That there is kind of a war between your true nature and the kinds of rules you put on it to suppress and pretend like it's not there. I think both sides of that are legitimately really interesting. And the way the Green Knight is played as, like, this weird sort of tree man with that weird boomy, almost James Earl Jones kind of voice to him, where he opens the movie with that where he makes it. He comes in with that olive branch, literally, and he says it's a game, and there's really nothing about the words he's saying to you that make you believe that this is actually going to be bad. It makes it seem like he is legit just coming here in peace and having fun. But everything about the way that scene is shot and the way his voice possesses the queen makes it seem like the most threatening thing in the world. And I really appreciate that tension between how fucking terrified Sir Gawain is in that moment and the whole kingdom versus is this a thing that's truly something to be afraid of?
Well, like I want to backtrack a bit and talk more about the implications of chivalry, because chivalry and just like politeness of society and stuff is something interesting, because it's at least it's one of the contributing factors, and it is framed very particularly in this film as that which separates humans from animals, man from nature. And it is fascinating the number of moments in this where Sir Gawain encounters man or humans dead in nature. You get that first one with the body hanging in the rack in the wind, the skeleton hanging in the rack in the wind. You see the body of the soldier in the field. You see him like basically come to grips with the fact that that could very well be his fate when he has been tied up by the muggers, the robbers, whatever. And then you see him like restore dignity and civility to someone who has fallen to the fate of being left for dead in the world, with the ghost lady. And then he just kind of, from that point, he's just in the roughest of situations. Like, that's the last time he sleeps in a bed until he gets to the couple's house. He's just on the sides of cliffs and in caves and living like the ancestors and stuff. So it is really fascinating to see all of that as, like, if not for the rules of chivalry, if not for the code by which we live in society, then we would all just be animals. We would all just be living like this. And look what living like this is like. It's awful. You know, I don't remember if I was talking to you about this or not. Last week we were doing a question around the workplace. It was like, okay, option 1, you are on a desert island. You can do everything it takes to survive, you know? And that can include, like, foraging for food, drinking your own pee, building fires, what the fuck ever. Like, you're going to make it out alive. Or option B, you can just die. Which one do you choose? And I think, like, 90% of people are like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna die. Like, that sounds awful. And so, like, you see what it is in this movie to live purely dependent on nature and live with nature, and be just an animal again. And then you see... So it's kind of making the argument of how important chivalry is and how important the code of a society is. Until you get to the scene where he kind of like considers breaking chivalry, and then that you get that whole flash forwards scene, which is fascinating.
Well, and to kind of complicate that picture more is what's really interesting about things like the chivalric code and the stuff that it ultimately inspired and the things that it's based on is that philosophically it's kind of treated as a natural law in itself, that it's not only the thing that separates us from the animals, but the idea that you must be chivalrous is something that's like divined from God, that the natural, right, correct, universally good thing to do is to be chivalrous. And so you've got the Green Knight, who is both an embodiment of nature because he is literally just like a fucking tree man, but is also a knight, calls himself a knight, obeys chivalric code and rules, has an olive branch, is literally framed in the image of a man-made creation, which is a knight, to kind of marry those two symbols together of something that is both natural and outside of human creation, but also believed to be universal and not simply a social construct, I think that's really interesting. There's so much in this movie where I feel like you could take any sort of sequence of it and see all of the intricate layers and vagueness and abstractions of it that make it really worth talking about. And there's a lot of different reads to it. And it's so finely detailed. Like, it feels almost like a fucking Stanley Kubrick movie, like 2001 or The Shining or something, where there's just a lot of atmosphere and there's a lot of very particular design choices and vague dialogue could kind of just give you anything you want to take out from it. And I really appreciate that. I really like that. Unlike The Northman, where I feel like that's a movie that has a very sort of clear thesis by the end of it. This movie can be read along the same lines as that, or it can be read the exact opposite way. And it's a kind of movie that I feel like doesn't get a lot of respect because people just take a movie that could mean anything to mean, oh, it's about nothing then, because they didn't care to give you a meaning. And no, it's not that at all.
Yeah.
It's that making it a kind of litmus test, making it something where you sort of have to create an honest reflection of what you find interesting in order to pull the interesting things out of it. That's cool. That's interesting to me. And I appreciate that there's just so much buried here that we could just talk about for ages. Like, even up to the point where, like, his guide is a fox, and then the fox talks to him. So how much of this is a tension between humanity and nature versus the need for these two things to reconcile? The fact that he is kind of always asking things in the natural world for help, but the only things that do end up helping him are people. But then the help that the people give him always seems to be either a double-edged sword or a double cross of some kind. Even like the family that takes him in, the wife and her lord or whatever, even they're not overtly doing anything wrong per se, but everything about that encounter is framed as if they are. As if, like, this system that they just introduced him to, which is, you can stay here, you can have whatever you want, just promise me whatever my wife gives you, you give me back. There's nothing about it that seems overtly sinister in the way it's spoken. But everything about the way those scenes are shot and the way Sir Gawain reacts to them makes it seem like this is so strange. Why would someone possibly give me rules in this way?
Mm-hmm. Can I just interlude for that whole section with the thing? When I found out that was in the original myth and stuff, I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that helps. Because I just thought this was like a weird, like, subplot fetish film for a hot minute there.
Like, it's a weird detour, yeah.
Like, those two are 100% just, they're just trying to enact their cuck fetish, right? Like, there's no subtlety to it whatsoever.
They're the guys, there's the couple you meet on vacation who are like, hey, we saw you from across the bar and we like your vibe.
Yeah, like, we were wondering, maybe you want to come over and, like, fuck my wife or something? What? Get a drink? Like, he comes and he kisses him and shit, and I'm just like, yep, nope, that's it. That's the fucking vibe. Like, that's just, it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie in my head. It is 100% just there because it's a weird, like, fetish film that he just wanted to insert into a regular film.
I appreciate the sort of vignette structure of this movie where there are a lot of, like, sealed off, one-off adventures that he's going on along his journey to get to the chapel and meet the Green Knight, meet his fate. And they're all thematically related. They're all kind of building towards his critical moment at the end there. But each one of them does kind of function on its own and can have its own sort of moral derived from it independently. I think all of that's really good. And the way they intercut the chapter breaks, the fact that it isn't just like title card, that it's like actually something that emerges out of the scene or something that gets led into with dialogue or the music, all of that is really, really well done.
Yeah, no, I liked that. That was all fine and good. I didn't, like, love it or anything, but I thought it worked. I don't know, what else with this movie did you want to get into?
How did you feel about Dev Patel as our lead character, who's always just kind of like deer in the headlights?
I thought he was fine. I didn't really, like, I never really had a problem with his performance, but I don't think he ever really, like, wowed me or just, like, really, really sucked me in to the point where I was just like, you know, when an actor's just going for it and you're just kind of, like, there. I don't think he really did that, but I also don't think he really has a scene which would allow you to do that.
That's my big thing with him is I feel like he just kind of has no screen presence, and so like he doesn't have a lot of material to work with to suck you in. But I don't feel like he's doing much while he's there. Like he's a fine enough actor, but he always does just kind of feel like scenery in the scenes.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't help that, like, they picked an actor who doesn't really have much screen presence to play a character who's never really done much of anything. You know?
Well, yeah.
So, like, I have to assume that's intentional, that they want... I kind of feel like we're maybe in an Arthur Miller Death of a Salesman. No, I can prove that you can make a tragedy about someone who isn't great. Yeah, but then you just made a really boring fucking play. It's like, yeah, we wanted an actor who isn't, like, really, like, super engaging and stuff to play a character that isn't super important. Okay, but then you kind of... Okay.
Yeah. I wonder how much of this is the directing choice, too. Because Dev Patel is also in that David Copperfield movie that came out a couple years before this. And he's amazing in that. He's super magnetic. His performance is huge and bombastic. It's got those understated moments to it, but he's got so much personality in that movie. And then you bring him here, and it feels like someone just put in like the gray filter over him or something. It's like he got directed by George Lucas in this one, and I don't entirely love what he does. When this movie initially came out, there were a lot of people that felt like he was snubbed a Best Actor Oscar for this role, and I'm like, I really don't think so. Like, genuinely, last year's Best Actor Oscar was kind of stacked with a lot of good performances. I do not think this is one of them.
Yeah, but I mean, this year's just going to go to Jared Leto for Morbius, so it's okay.
Oh, well, yeah, of course, Morbius sweet.
Morbius sweet, baby.
Fun fact about Morbius is that it's actually the first and only movie to get all of the Oscars for the next year before the announcements.
Nice.
Yeah, so pre-winner.
Pre-winner chicken dinner. Get morbed. You know what? Every movie could be so much better if it just ends with the last line of dialogue being, get morbed. And then Morbius just out from the screen. It'd be great.
No spoilers for Obi-Wan Kenobi, so if you haven't seen that show, turn off the video real quick. But I do really love that scene at the end of the 6th episode where he ignites his lightsaber in front of Vader and he's like, it's Kenobin time.
Anyway, sorry, we got off on a little silly bit.
What were you saying?
I don't know. I just don't feel like the actor. Like Dev Patel, he's fine. It's just there's nothing really memorable. Like I think the scene where I'm with him the most is at least is the scene that he needs you to be with him the most, and that's when he's sitting there, getting ready to accept the axe, and he just can't do it every time. Like, first of all, the Green Knight does not help. That dude lifts that axe so slowly, but like he just keeps like freaking out and flinching, and he's just terrified of it and all. And I thought that was probably the scene where he's with it the most, and probably the most interesting and like engaging kind of scenes that he gets to do. But at the same time, like, it's literally at the end of the movie before you get there.
He does a pretty good job in the scene where he initially has to fight the Green Knight, and he tries to get him to make a move, and the Knight just won't do it, and you can see how freaked out and how in over his head he is. There's even like a nice little touch where it almost seems like the sword is too heavy for him, so he's not prepared to actually swing it, which is why he's asking the Knight to make the first move. I thought that bit's really good. But then for the rest of it, until the end that you're talking about, I do sort of feel like he's just kind of a passenger along for the rest of this movie, like all of us. And he's not turning in anything that really makes me kind of gravitate towards him or even really like feel for him in the moments. Like, he's not bad. Like, I don't want to give off the impression that he's bad. He's just kind of bland.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, it's just not like a. It's. I don't think it's really something that's meant to be a very memorable performance. Again, a lot of that isn't necessarily his fault because it is just the way that it was written. It feels like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not the kind of movie that I think asks you to be in his head in the same way as I think you might want to look forward to something like the David Copperfield movie or whatever else. Um, how did you feel about the weird blending of practical and CGI effects all throughout this, with like the Green Knights showing up in like all makeup versus like the CGI fox that he's rolling around with? How did you feel like the movie looked?
I mean, I think it all looked brilliant. They shoot the fox at such a distance, and you only get the occasional close up on it where you could even begin to think, oh yeah, that's CGI, and it's like if it were a dog, I don't think you'd ever question whether or not it was real. You know, the only reason that you begin to think, oh yeah, that has to be CGI is because yeah, you can train a fox, but like you can't train a fox that well, you know, where it'll just sit there and like look directly at the camera and howl on command, kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, the only time I think the fox like actively looks bad is when the dude lets him out of the bag and he's just like he jumps down and then starts talking to Sirgawan. I feel like that's the only instance where I'm like, oh, this is not fluid at all.
yeah, it's so funny because we were watching that scene and like the whole time, every time the fox showed up, I was like, I want a pet fox. I want a pet fox. Then we get to the scene where they're at the boat and the fox like stands in front of him and tries to get him to go back, and it's talking in just the creepiest voice in the world. She's like, I don't want a pet fox anymore. That's terrifying. I'm like, what, you wouldn't want a pet dog that could talk, but the only like caveat is it talks in like a terrifying voice. You could say like normal everyday things. It's just what it says is just in a really creepy voice. Like, you know, you could get a pet dog that can talk, and it could be like, I want to go outside, but you're just gonna say no because it says, I want to go outside. I don't know. Just these are thoughts I have.
I mean, it's a very good thought. I would love to have a pet fox. I would love to know what the fox says. But
What does the fox say?
Yeah, no, I really like this movie. I think it's really, really good. I saw it when it first came out, and I was kind of mid on it. Then I watched it again, and I was still I wasn't grasping what about this was working. And then I watched it again for this, like the third time, like, oh, okay, this finally clicks for me. So it took a little while for me, which is weird because it feels like the kind of movie that I would like instantly. But it took a minute, and I do actually really recommend going back through this because I feel like when you know where it's going, there is a lot you can pull out throughout the movie and different dialogue exchanges and little scenes here and there that kind of build the thematic narrative you want for whatever viewing you have. So I really appreciated the rewatchability of this, especially because it's not super long. It's only 2 hours, which is nice and refreshing. And it feels like it really takes its time even at that runtime, which is nice. I also really, really like the score. I thought the score was really good and iconic. It's kind of got that old world horror vibe to it. It sounds a lot like a lot of horror movies we make lately, where it's got all these like naturalistic noises that are just reverberating and echoing throughout, and it's kind of turned into a score that's combined with some old folky music, and it sounds really creepy, and it's a really good mood setter. It's one of those things where I feel like I could just play the score in the background while I'm reading like a creepy book or something.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, the score is pretty good. I don't remember really reacting to it in any way, but that's kind of what it's always intending for. You know, a good score doesn't want to draw too much attention to itself. So I appreciated that aspect of it well enough. The effects overall I thought were really good. The Green Knight looked fantastic. The giants looked weird, but like in a way that was just genuinely unsettling.
The sort of like inverted Slenderman look.
Yeah, they're like Yeah, of course they're naked, because, like, why would giants ever be able to wear clothes, right? Like, there's no way. So it's just kind of, a creepy, weird look to that. It's just kind of uncomfortable. The fact that they're so big, they're just kind of, like, lost in the fog, and then they just instantly almost kill the guy just because. And I thought that was all pretty solid stuff. What did you think of the scenes with the couple? Because we've joked around about that a little bit. We haven't really talked about what they add or take away from the film itself.
I really like them. I thought they were kind of they felt a little bit more like a plot detour the first time I saw the movie. But the more I went back to it, the more we've talked about it, the more I do actually really like that segment. I think a lot of the thematic heavy lifting ultimately comes from those interactions, because it's the wife who's talking the most about all of these ideas about what nature is and everything returning to the green at the end of the day. It's also the one where I feel like the fact that he is a fledgling knight, the fact that he has to live by a certain code, and that includes not having sex or not being improper with ladies or being able to have certain expectations in those relationships, all of that works the most. The idea that he gets a gift from her and he's supposed to kiss her and he's super uncomfortable by it. The idea that he can't have a sexual relationship with her, but she keeps sort of like tempting him to the point where like she literally just makes him come and then walks away, and he's completely dumbfounded by it. Even that little sort of creepy aside where you see that old lady with the blindfold behind him, and it becomes this sort of moment where like, oh, he's ashamed to be in this moment, he's ashamed to be seen in this way. I think everything about what they kind of like force him to do, where he needs to he gets pampered in this house only in exchange for giving everything he's given back to the Lord, and how uncomfortable that makes him, and how that sort of exchange system inside that house doesn't entirely work for what his way of life is, not only because it's not the best way of life, but because he's just bad at living it. I feel like that section of the movie makes the strongest case that as much as Sir Gawain wants to be a knight, he kind of lacks the fortitude as a person to be a knight in the first place. And so when you get to the end, and he's accepting of his fate, I feel like it hits a little bit harder, because he's the least grown up in those sequences, and he's the most grown up by the time you get there. So it really does feel like he went on a journey when you see him feel so childish in those moments by contrast. So I liked all that stuff quite a bit.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was interesting how it's like that final temptation, and you begin to wonder if like his appointment will be missed or something because of this. If this is like initially you think it's like, oh, this is the last safe haven. He's gonna argue to be convinced not to leave, kind of thing, and to just stay here and accept. And that's kind of like what it sets itself up as. But just the more time you spend there, the more and more uncomfortable it becomes, and it just gets more and more terrifying in and of itself because of that. And that was like really interesting, how that all like functioned and kind of inverted that trope of storytelling to take the last safe place that you could stay forever and make it feel so unsafe, you know? I like that aspect.
100% agree. I appreciate how much this movie kind of toes the line between being a dark fantasy and just a straight up horror movie in certain instances. It really feels like the director has that sensibility down, and so much of the stuff here that's unsettling or creepy could kind of just full blown be put in a horror movie. Like it has the same vibe in places like Hereditary and The Witch, and it comes out of that same distribution company. This is an A24 movie, which is A24 is kind of a meme at this point, and it's kind of weird to see how people talk about it, because A24 is entirely a distribution company. They sometimes produce movies, but more often than not they just distribute them. And they've gotten a reputation for being like this iconic art house distribution company that has all of the best films ever. If it's an A24 movie, it's like going to be automatically going to be good. You've probably seen stuff from it without even knowing it's A24, but it kind of fits a specific mold of whatever A24 movies are. Like, so the Green Knight's an A24 movie. They did Euphoria. They have a lot of stuff that's just kind of like, let's mix pop culture weirdness with high art. Hereditary is A24, Everything Everywhere All at Once is A24, Uncut Gems. Like, it's a studio that's definitely feels like it's got a house style, but it's not itself a studio. And so now it's become this meme among like film bros of like, oh yeah, A24 movies, man. I love A24 movies. It's like the new Fight Club. It's the new sort of like, if a dude tells you they love A24, it's probably a red flag.
Steve, do you love A24 movies?
I mean, yeah, kind of. I like all the movies I've seen that have come out from A24. It's kind of funny, like how much of a meme it's become at this point, and how many misconceptions there are about what they are because of it. Because people act like A24 is the thing making the movies, and they're not. They're just finding artsy directors and giving them a channel to distribute.
Well, what's the name of the... I don't even know, because it feels like a similar situation. In comics, the colorist, Hi-Fi, right? Is that someone's actual name or initials or something, or is that like just a program? Like, what's the deal with that? It feels like that.
It's like a company. So there's like 2 or 3 big like coloring companies and lettering companies that effectively like do most of the work for the big 2. Like if you read a Marvel comic, almost all of them will say for the letterer VCs and then whoever the name is. And VC is the place where they all get hired out from. And so there's like 5 people that just letter every Marvel comic ever that just all come from the same studio. So yeah, it's kind of like that. Clayton Cowles is another person like that, where like he usually works with Tom King, but he's part of a company that basically just letters every book at the big 2. It's not the same as like Adita Bidikar lettering for James Tynion on Image. Like they're not independent artists the same way you would assume other things are. They all work freelance for a company.
Okay. No, just like it kind of feels like that, where it's like it's credited. It seems like it's like a director or something that's got a weird name, Elon Musk's kid or some shit like that. But it's just a company. It's amusing to me.
Yeah, and Blumhouse is sort of a similar situation, because a lot of people say like Blumhouse almost single-handedly like revitalized horror movies in the last 10 years. And Blumhouse is slightly different because they're not a distributor, they're a production company. So like Blumhouse does actually make movies like Halloween and The Purge and Happy Death Day and all of that stuff. A24 does not. A24 distributes them and very occasionally produces them. But it's a similar situation where people will like talk about these studios as if they're the things making the art, and they're usually not.
Yeah, it's weird. It's funny. People don't understand how to talk about film, myself included. It's me. I'm people. I don't know. This was an interesting one. It's funny. I've been like cruelly stuck with you for the majority of Cinema Month now, and I'm actually been not as harsh and brutal on these movies as I thought I would be. When I told Haley that I needed to watch a movie last night for the show, she was like, "What's the movie?" And I'm like, "It's called The Green Knight." And she goes, "Oh, good, I can fall asleep because it sounds fucking boring."
Oh god.
Yeah, her and I are on the same wavelength with fucking cinema. Like fucking. So I was sitting there and I was kind of like, yeah, this is the one I heard about, and it sounds like it's gonna start getting more heady, and this certainly is, right? But it's I don't know. It's this doesn't feel like it's at that pretentious level of film that kind of drives me crazy. So I just enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Which I think is fair to say that like I do go into these movies trying to give them a fair shake, where I'm not just gonna like find things to hate on principle, but like I can get annoyed very easily, very quickly. And again, like it's still a terrible movie because they're whispering so much.
That is probably the worst thing about this whole movie, in my opinion. Is just like the volume is so fucking low the entire time.
Dude, okay. I think I've talked about this before, but fuck whatever. My TV, if I just put the volume on 1, and it can go up to like 90 or something, if I just put the volume on 1, you can hear it perfectly from the couch, and you can hear it like still pretty well from like, behind a wall kind of thing. I had to jack it up to like fucking 20 to understand what was going on through the majority of this film. And even then, there were still scenes where I'm like, wait, what? And then, like, of course, because every fucking movie does this now, and it drives me crazy, all the dialogue is super quiet, but then there'll just be like that one scene where the score or the sound effects or whatever's going on gets super fucking loud. And so then you've got your volume all cranked up and you gotta fucking turn it down. Hate that shit. Just audio balancing is yes, you can do the trick where you make the volume get even louder for like the really hype part. That's fine, but you shouldn't like do that so hard that like it becomes intolerable, that shit drives me crazy.
No, that's fair. I think there's maybe, I don't want to even say it's a pretentious choice. I think it's maybe just a poor choice to like not try and train the audio a little bit more to just be audible, just to be like very bare bones understandable. And there was an article that came out a year ago, maybe less than a year ago, about movies progressively becoming harder to understand and all of the problems that come with modern sound mixing. So I'm sure there was like reasons for that. I just don't know enough about the production of the movie to know what was up with that. But if you feel like in the last 3 or 4 years movies have become harder to understand, it is not just you. It is apparently an industry-wide problem.
Why? What's going
I can link
on?
the article.
Yeah,
I'll see if I
have
can
to
find it because it was interesting. It came up with a lot of interesting reasons. I mean, some of it is just kind of basic stuff of just like audio technology has gotten more and more complicated, and that the fact that there are so many different services to stream things in and so many different formats that things have to be compatible for makes the task of editing sound really difficult, because trying to adjust sound for a movie that's going to be released in the theaters and then adjusting that for a Blu-ray versus a DVD versus Netflix versus Hulu, that actually requires a lot of differences. And trying to find the right balance that plays to all of them is exceptionally hard. But there are other reasons for it too, and if I can find that article, I'll send it to you. It's legitimately an interesting piece.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, there's a lot of interviews with like audio engineers and stuff who just talk about how like they're just expected to make the movie audible, and people don't understand how hard their job actually is.
I mean, you'd think you can hear it.
Well, no, that's the thing, right? You would think it's that simple. Apparently, it's not.
I don't know, man. This sounds like when someone like at a job starts like dragging their feet and making the job seem like so much more difficult than it needs to be, and it's all in like service of trying to get more recognition or a raise or something. I'm getting those kind of vibes right now. I think the audio mixer industry is just like trying to get a fucking collective raise.
I mean, honestly,
by making everything worse.
I'm sure there's a lot more merit to it somewhere, but yeah, no, I mean, I think The Green Knight's definitely another one of those movies that falls into that weird sort of camp. I mean, I've seen tons of movies that have come out over the last couple of years where I feel like they've had the same problem. And I mean, you know this about me. I have to like have the remote in hand because I will be adjusting volume throughout the entire watching experience.
Yeah, no,
just because I feel like I can never find the right volume for these things.
Yeah, no, and I hate that. Especially, like, I've become... It used to be whatever if you had to adjust it once or twice. It's like, fuck it, whatever. Or I'll just keep it really loud the whole time and let the loud scenes just be loud as fuck, right? But then I had a kid, and I can't do that anymore. And so now I've become, like, painfully aware of it. And it's just like, this is stupid. Why are you doing this? Like, it's so funny.
It's getting to be kind of irritating, especially for like longer blockbuster movies where there are so many like sort of ebbs and flows between the dialogue and the action. And then for a lot of like port-overs of old movies, like you try to watch a 90s action movie on a high-def streaming service, and the contrast between the action scenes and the dialogue audio is fucking night and day. It's absolutely fucking insane. Try watching the first Mission Impossible on streaming, and the sound will just not fucking balance. It's literally impossible to just keep the volume on one setting for that movie.
Jesus.
I fucking hate it.
The worst...
Try watching fucking Speed. Speed's the exact same way.
The worst one I had was Godzilla vs. Kong. I woke Leah up 3 times while watching that fucking movie because the thing would go from like monster roaring loud as fuck, clearly going off into the red, to I don't know, how are we gonna stop the giant monkey and the giant it's just fucking terrible. Oh, let's talk about the Hollow Earth theory for 5 fucking minutes.
Yeah, man, I don't know what it fucking is, but there is so much of that all over the fucking place. Also, I just linked you to the article. So for anyone listening to this, it's an article that came out on /film.com. It did come out in December, but literally just Google why is movie dialogue hard to hear and you will find it.
Okay. Well, alright. I think we've gotten pretty much off track from The Green Knight. I don't think there's anything else we really need to talk about. We're kind of running out of stuff on this one. It's harder with just 2 people. So let's go ahead and go on to ratings. Steve, why don't you go first? I'm curious where you're at on this one.
Honestly, I think of the 3 we've watched so far, this is probably my favorite. I'm going to go ahead and give this one 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5 sickly King Arthurs.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. This is my favorite of what we've seen so far. It's just the one that felt the most genuine. It felt like it had everything that it was promised you. I didn't feel like I was cheated out of a final battle, like I did with the previous 2. And even then, last time I did get one, but it was not as epic. So yeah, I did genuinely enjoy this one all the way through. So I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5. Fox Companions. They should make a video game of this movie.
Everything is improved by a Fox companion. It's just the law of the universe.
You know, the Russians bred domesticated foxes as an experiment to see about like how the process happened with dogs. And you can still get them. You can still get a domesticated fox as a pet.
I mean, I'm not saying I would say no to a fox for a pet. I just feel like there isn't enough centuries of historical precedent for me to trust that.
I mean, people have them. Like you can look at the like videos and stuff of people with foxes as pets. They're basically just like Shire dogs.
I don't know. There's just something about it like some fucking Winter Soldier program. Like, I don't know. This feels like this could break at any second.
I mean, probably. That's the risk you take. But like, all right.
These dogs who have been man's companions since what seems like the dawn of time. So.
Okay. Hear me out on this, Steve. All right. Here's I'm 100. You're going to buy one of these domesticated foxes immediately after I say this. Okay.
All right. What you got?
You're walking your domesticated fox out in the dog park, and crazy hot chicks come up to you, and you get to talk about your domesticated fox, and then you go home and get laid.
All right, I'm here for this.
Yep, you're getting the like you're on the website, you're googling it right now. You're budgeting the money.
A domesticated fox.
Name a better icebreaker than You have a pet fox?
Honestly, you're right. Like, what pops that?
I would Mr. Steve Baxley, I would absolutely cut my arm off for pussy, would 100% take the risk of getting mauled by a fucking fox in exchange for pussy, so...
Honestly, yeah. If it gets me laid, like, once, it was worth it. 100% worth it.
Steve's the motherfucker that goes out and buys the teacup pig.
True. I should do that, honestly. That seems like a great idea.
Steve's just gonna have a fucking menagerie of animals that he has bought with the express purpose of getting laid.
I'll just have like a fucking walk-in closet. I'm like, okay, is it teacup pig day, or is it domesticated fox day, or is it pet owl day?
100% pet owl day. I got the fucking glove. You just go to like a bar. Oh my goodness. Oh, this is silly. Okay. All right. Steve, is next week the last one of these, or is there more?
It is. Last week's the last one. I figured I'd do a month of movies, so 4 weeks that are all genre or thematically related to each other, just that came out from different years. So we started this journey with the 80s with Conan the Barbarian. Then we watched 2022 The Northman, which is basically a realistic Conan the Barbarian. Mm-hmm. Then we watched an ancient Arthurian legend in The Green Knight. So now we're going to watch a Greek legend from one of your favorite directors of Stanley Kubrick. Okay. So let's watch the 1960 historical epic Spartacus.
Okay. Yeah, sounds like a time. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am the Exile.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.